as you see, the title to the session is Coming Out, right? And I know a lot of times, especially those of us who function in certain spiritual atmospheres, we see the idea. Okay, I brought Antonio in. All right, that was smooth. All right, okay.
Yeah, nice and smooth.
Yeah, silky.
Yeah, loud and clear, by the way.
All right, cool. Give thanks. Give
Yeah,
thanks.
firing on all cylinders.
All right, that's what I like
Peace,
to hear.
peace, peace.
Peace, peace. Koti Kashia. Yeah, man. All right, cool. Yes, I think I got a good rhythm here. Yeah, man. But I know a lot of times when we speak about coming out, especially for those who are maybe more in tune to the time or in tune to what's happening around the world, and when we say coming out, we speak about coming out of, the world thought or the world consciousness. And I mean, it could be that too, but I wanted to focus a little bit more on, and follow the train of thought that we've been building on, just in terms of like being comfortable in your own skin, at least until you grow new skin. But being able to find a level of peace with what it is that you are feeling, what it is that you are thinking, and finding that sense of identity, without a whole lot of external, what we would call enmeshment. So I wanted to build on that a little bit, just in the topic of coming out, right? And I know often that term is used in a lot of different ways by a lot of different communities, coming out, right? But here's the deal, right? A lot of us are in a place still where we have not really embraced the truth of what we're living on an external level, because maybe we may feel it takes us too far out from those who are around us and support us. And a lot of times it comes from the relationships that we have with our families early on. And we kind of begin to suffer from this toxic family entanglement. Not necessarily saying that our families are toxic, but the level and the type of entanglement and enmeshment, if you will, becomes toxic. And a lot of times that comes from people pleasing, having a very weak sense of self, but all children, go through this experience of just being attached, in particular attached to their parents as infants, and the identity of the infant is directly enmeshed and entwined with the identity of the parent. And that's perfectly normal. It's supposed to be as such. And there comes a moment in everyone's development, everyone who was once a child, where detachment becomes critical, right? And they have to detach from the identity of the parent. And that's just about that's a healthy and mature way that we come into the world as adults. And sometimes, depending on our family dynamic, unfortunately, we are not permitted by our parents or by our guardians to actually experience our detachment phase. We're not allowed to kind of cultivate our own identity or our own id, and that clear stance of I am. Like when the Most High is asked, who are you? I am, right? And we all have to have the I am experience, or experience, I guess we could say I amness, and become differentiated from our parents, right? And of course, this is the healthy development of an ego, right? And when we're unable to have the I am experience, and we're unable to kind of create strength in our own identity, we start to experience things like social anxiety. We start to experience things like clinginess or neediness, or empathetic overload. That's like, you go into a space and you're feeling everybody's energy, and you may find yourself crying all of a sudden. You can't be around large groups of people because you just feel so much. And that's because you've, as a child, you never went through that experience properly where you could detach from the identity of those that you were connected to. And sometimes it happens because maybe there's something with us, and we're afraid to detach. But oftentimes is because the parents don't understand or your guardians don't understand the importance in allowing you or urging you to detach. And like I said, and that also leads to like a sense of low self-worth. We find ourselves in very abusive or toxic relationships as a result, and just exploring all forms of like unhealthy codependencies, you know, because not being able to really gauge what a connection should be, and that toxic enmeshment begins to kind of it blurs the boundaries between us and another person or you and them. And when you have that blurred blind, or sometimes it's not even blurred, sometimes there is no boundary, sometimes it's absolutely absent. And when you experience that from a maternal figure or a paternal figure, your mother or your father early on, then you lose your ability to separate your thoughts and to separate your feelings and your emotions from your parents' thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And that leads to a lack of identity or lack of formed identity that leads to a dysfunctional sense of self, if you will. So that often creates the reality, the sad reality, of course, of what we've been talking about, in terms of just maybe not feeling like I'm allowed to express who I am, or when we spoke about caring too much, being an overcarer or being a people pleaser, if you will, and in order to move past that sort of issue, that sort of toxic enmeshment, or that lack of personal identity, or that poor sense of self, the first thing we sort of have to do is to find worth within ourselves rather than the worth that we would look to find from others. So as opposed to looking for that thumbs up, that gold star, that pat on the head from someone outside of us, the first thing we have to do is to find that worth inside. Because what happens when we don't, when we don't have that level of acceptance, we begin to pretend like we're someone and something that we're not, you know, and that's essentially living a lie. So essentially, we begin to live a lie, and we erase the possibilities of kindness towards ourselves. We erase the possibility of forgiveness towards ourselves. We erase the possibilities of care towards ourselves. So one of the powerful things that we do, and children do it when they're younger, but they learn how to say no, right? No creates boundaries, you know? And what's also powerful with no, coupled with no, is walking away. I think it's always one of the funniest things, when you tell a child to do something. And I mean, as a parent, you check them on it, but when you tell a toddler to do something, they say no and then walk out the room. I think it's just hilarious. And as a parent, you can't sometimes certain things your child will do, you can't laugh. It's funny, but you can't laugh, or you can't let them see you laugh. You know, but I've always found that to be really funny. The child puts their foot down, no, and they either run and the little toddler waddle, they waddle out the room, and But what they're really doing in that point is they're detaching from the parental identity, and it's very important that happens, because even though we read these religious stories that oftentimes we mistranslate, there's a reality about us, and about us people, and we seek to find nobility and obliterating the self. And there really is no nobility in that. There's really no real nobility and self-sacrifice when it's fueled by fear. I'm afraid to really say how I feel. I'm afraid to really say who I am. I'm afraid to really be who I am, so forth and so on. So I'm going to sacrifice who and what I am, which then will generate bitterness inside of me. And then that bitterness will, eventually build up into a certain kind of anger. And that's all because I never learned how to respectfully say no. I mean, you don't have to waddle out the room or whatever, but there's a respectful way to do it. And a lot of times, again, we're avoiding ourselves. That's a part of who it is, of what it is, excuse me. Being true to yourself and coming out, right? Like, people come out in different ways. Again, I want to reiterate that for those who are coming in late. I know some may have thought this was about one thing, and it could be about that thing. You know what I mean? It's all in how you take it, right? Coming out of the closet, right? Sometimes it's coming out of the closet. Sometimes it's coming out of yourself. Sometimes it's coming out of Babylon. Sometimes it's coming out of your emotions, whatever it is. But no matter how you look at it, you have to first address your inner terrain or your inner ecosystem. And a lot of people, they avoid doing that like the plague. They run for themselves. They avoid themselves at all costs. And, a very simple way to kind of address yourself, to remedy that, is journaling, right? A lot of us hear about journaling, and, journaling your feelings is a great way. Also, some form of creative outlet, whether it's, dance or some form of art. And you don't have to be a virtuoso at any of those things. You don't have to be a perfectionist. You just really have to allow yourself to connect again with the inner you and how or what the inner you thinks, how and what the inner you feels, and what the inner you believes. However, whatever you call the inner you, and it becomes really powerful when you set a time, like let's say daily. This is the time when I explore my inner landscape. Look at your inner self as a world to explore, right? It's like any planet, and there are so many aspects and parts of us that we leave unexplored or really undeveloped because, again, we've sacrificed ourselves in the name of trying to be likable. And that's one of the worst things you could do, is to try to be likable. I mean, it's great if you are, but loving yourself, which means connecting with yourself, which means exploring yourself, exploring your inner landscape, is the first step really to becoming likable and removing or moving away from that people pleasing, right? And even with the people pleasing, a lot of times what you want to be able to do, or what you want to do, is first determine to, like, who's around you. Who am I trying to please? Who am I making so much more important than my own journey and what it is that I need to do. Sometimes we're surrounded by toxic people, and those toxic people are acting out on their own wounds, and as a result, their wounds never heal. And we feel we kind of need to bend over backwards, to keep them around because they're so wounded, you see. And it becomes draining, right? It becomes demoralizing. And, anything that's toxic, obviously, is not necessarily healthy for the system, but we start to look at, these are the people who will influence us the most on an unconscious level. So one of the good things to ask yourself is, like, what people do I keep around me, who are toxic, and paying attention to that. And is there any way I can begin to reduce contact with those individuals, or just straight up cut ties, right? And that starts to get you into a healthier place where you can have a healthier dialogue with yourself, and to have less what we could even say nonviolent and in communication. Because when you're constantly self-sacrificing, it's a very violent thing to do to yourself, to constantly be cutting off a part of yourself because you want to be around someone who's diabolical, or you have a snaky kind of relative, and those are normal things that exist in life. I mean, those individuals are going to be there regardless of what. But if the majority of the people who are around you do not genuinely support you and what you do, then you have to really kind of focus in on if, well, maybe it's time to begin building some type of experiences with other folk, you know. And one of the keys to start thinking that way, start doing that, man, is you got to get out of your head, right? Yeah, you're exploring your thoughts and your feelings, but one of the most powerful things is you always want to try to get your mind and your heart to be working within the same step, within the same rhythm, right? Because oftentimes your brain will be racing and moving around and reacting to different thoughts, and it's full of all of those thoughts, right? And your heart is an indifferent sort of space, right? Your heart is always going to hold the soul's movement and the soul's intention. The soul invigorates the body through the life of the heart. So one of the greatest things is like when you have all of this external chatter and you're constantly trying to impress upon and conform to that external chatter, is to go inward into the heart, right? Because the heart doesn't care. The heart is indifferent. If you try to go to a certain emotion or to a certain chakra, it's going to have a leaning a certain way. If you try to go to the crown or the brow, which is the head, right? So I'm saying, oh, it doesn't matter. You can sacrifice yourself because the body is unimportant. What's important is the development and the extension of your spirit body. If you go down lower, you'll go into your emotions, and your lower chakras are your emotions, and your emotions. Oh, you can't do that. That's it's your day one. That's your granny. That's your this. That's your that. You should want them to like you. Remember that time when your car broke down on the side of the road and they came and picked you up in the middle of the night? You owe them for that. You see, but when you go into the space of the space of the heart speaks from the soul. It's indifferent, and it just this is what we need to do. That's how the heart will push forward. This is what needs to happen. So one of the most powerful things you can always remember is that heart is the pathway or the opening to the soul. And the things that your soul is communicating to you will be communicated through the heart, right? And those things can be tapped into, via different forms of meditation, different forms of visualizations, things like qigong. Even when you're really paying attention to how you're breathing and things like that, it helps you to be a lot more honest with yourself. And one of the honest things that you can you can ask the heart, or you can ask yourself in the presence of the heart. You ask, is what I thought my life was going to be like? It's a great question, right? You know, to answer honestly. Of course, most of the time when we're in front of people, we don't answer that. Oh no, I don't live with regrets. I have no regret. But ask yourself in your quiet time, honestly, am I happy? Am I really happy for real? Am I really at peace? And doing that consistently, you start to train yourself to be transparent with yourself. You train yourself to be honest with yourself. And yeah, the first couple of times you may deceive yourself. But the thing that was beautiful about questioning yourself or exploring things in the presence of the heart is that you can only lie to yourself for a little while, but eventually the truth comes out, right? So you might as well just tell the truth now because it's going to come out anyway, right? So why burn up time, you know? And just understand, like, the truth is a healing balm for the spirit. It's like the magical alchemical elixir for your spirit. That's why Proverbs, it says, and you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. Well, freedom comes through recapitalizing on the purpose of the soul. That's where your freedom is. So you do that through truth. Truth is a building block. You know, so mirror work is important. Just kind of getting into the habit of introspectively standing in front of a mirror and looking at yourself and paying attention to what comes up. I had a consort years ago. She used to not to like she did not like looking in mirrors, for an extended period. And she had, I remember her saying, she was like, don't you ever go through that experience when you look in the mirror and like you see something shifting in your eyes? And I was like, nah, not really. It's like maybe you're part iguana or something. I don't know. Maybe you're a reptile. I don't have that problem. So she was like, no, like when I go to the mirror and I look for too long, it's like something kind of sinister there. I'm like, so as a result, she literally, you couldn't get her to stand in front of a mirror and leave her eyes open for too long. She would not do it. So simple mirror therapy is very powerful because it forces you to move beyond the intrusive voices that we hear in our life, you know, and it forces us to look at not only what we really are, but some of the things like, what do I really want to do with my life? Let's be honest about what is the calling that I really feel in my heart in true honesty. What am I really most inspired about? See, these are your steps to coming out, right? And you can't come out to anyone else until you first come out to yourself. You see? And a lot of us are in a closet inside of a closet. You know, we lie to ourselves. We had certain dreams and certain visions that go back to our childhood, and they become secret dreams. And we won't give ourselves the permission to be unorthodox. We won't give ourselves permission to be unconventional and try different things, you know, and we let other people's opinions and other people's judgments and other people's visions, sort of be what we enmesh ourselves into without being able to complain, excuse me, to contain or to hold on to our personal identity. So when you begin to listen to that call and that pull and that urging of the soul, you begin to get into a place where your wings start to move out a little wider, and you begin to kind of dare to fulfill that inner vision. Some may call it a dream, but, at a certain age, we don't really dream. We have visions, right? If we're doing what we're supposed to do, you know. And we start to see that, yeah, man, I may have wasted some time, quote unquote. I may have made some mistakes, quote unquote, but there's nothing that has occurred in my life or that is occurring right now that is pointless. If I'm looking at things from the soul perspective, I realize that there's nothing that, I'm moving from dot to dot to dot. I'm connecting them. So that means there's a point to everything. If I move left, I'm going, anywhere you go in your life can be coordinated. It could be mapped out. It could be triangulated, right? So that means I'm moving from point to point to point to point to point. So therefore, everything I do is it has a point to it, And when you can begin to kind of see that, you'll start to connect with the trust that you have for your own strength, the trust that you have for your own ensoulment, right? And ensoulment would be like being able to reconnect with your soul, like, reconnecting with an old friend and understanding that that's a deep and very important practice, right? Because, yeah, we live in an external space, or we live in a place that externally it speaks to only rationalism, to what's pragmatic, to what's linear, to what's logical, and most important, what's material. And as a result, your soul, what your soul is communicating through your heart is irrelevant. In fact, it's usually considered as a childish illusion, right? So as a result, when you hear that from those who maybe have reared you or have raised you, you lose your ability to be authentic because True authenticity comes through walking the pathway of the heart. That's the only way you really will experience fulfillment, is walking that pathway of the heart and moving in alignment with the soul, right? And then you can look to come out. Now, again, like I said early on, is whatever you're trying to come. If you're trying to come out to your parents, hey, mom, dad, whatever. This is the spirit, the way I see spirit. Hey, mom, dad, I'm trying to come out. I really am an artistic person. I really don't want to do this particular career, whatever, whether it's mom, dad, friends, family, whomever. Obviously, you have to choose wisely who's around you, and you choose wisely who you reveal yourself to, because ultimately, it is about self love, and what fans the flames of your purpose. These are important things, but it's also about recognizing the necessity of certain things, right? So when we look at coming out, we also have to look at it too from a practical perspective, right? If it makes my journey, if it facilitates more easiness on my journey, more peace on my journey, then I'm gonna come out. If it doesn't, it's really no point, right? If if you have family that is so toxic that no matter what you say, they're gonna have something inappropriate to say. It doesn't matter. They're just looking for you to say something. Oh, what you doing now? What you up to now? What you wearing now? Oh, what's that smell? Well, you don't wear regular cologne like everybody else. If they're just looking for something, then it may not be any point, right? There may be no point because it's like maybe this is not gonna alleviate anything in my journey. It's not going to promote anything. It's not going to retard anything in what it is that I'm doing. But if coming out to certain people, or coming out of Babylon, is a part of your soul's journey, and what your heart is urging you to do, then let's face it, pretending to be someone you're not and pretending to be something else is probably it will probably be one of the most painful and disturbing things that you're experiencing in your life, that you've allowed to just exist and be chronic. Why not be honest with yourself? Why not be honest with those around you if it brings more peace? But like I said, before you can even think about coming out of Babylon, before you could think about coming out of the closet, in whichever closet you're in, because there's more than one trick bag. It's there's more than the sexual closet, or how I perceive my gender, or what sex style I enjoy. There's more closets than that. So whatever it is that you've decided to hide yourself behind, kind of giving yourself the permission to move out of that and connecting in some of the ways that I just shared with you. And again, feel free. Anybody who wants to speak, just raise your hand. I'm good now. I'm bringing people in.
Peace. Can I be
Peace.
heard?
You can be heard.
Okay, give thanks. So yes, give
Okay.
thanks for what you have shared so far. Two things I can definitely relate to is that aspect of people pleasing. From my experience, when you people please too long or for so long, that identity crisis it begins to form, and the only reason that people pleasing is happening is because there's no attachment to a people or a culture. And so, but there's attachment to everybody or anything that quote unquote shows love, or that just, or even supports what you're trying to avoid. And so when you're dropped from that, that people pleasing culture or whatever that is, that's when that depression will start sinking in, that who am I, or as you said, like that clinginess to anything or everything, because there's an avoidance of self, which will have me go into the qigong. I do qigong, of course, and so I really like qigong because it has you be present and focus in the moment, because you're only thinking about your breathing and just being calm and still. And in that practice, those sober assessment thoughts do come up, and those are oftentimes the ones that are ignored or dismissed. Those are that right answer, the things you know you're supposed to be doing. And so if you during those practices, just like qigong, when you ignore those, those thoughts, like, you know what, you really should get that oil change. You might as well get that oil change, but you ignore it or just and go past it. You don't really feel complete in that session of that workout, and so, but when you do something like qigong, and you're able to set goals, and you're able to set a plan of what it is you want to achieve and what you're trying to tackle, or what is it you're trying to avoid. And it helps with being a stepping stone of, after this, meditation session or qigong, I'm going to do this step, I'm going to do this step. So it's also important to really have a culture or people, too, that helps with those standards of ways of being, what we do and what we don't do, because then that people pleasing aspect won't be relevant, because especially within a culture such as Anu, where we are charged to, be active and be, just and have our purpose. So you have your own purpose and what you're doing, because we all doing it too, so yes, give thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Give thanks for that. I mean, that's a what you just shared is like one of the important first steps, like the pulling away, like you said. And it really, it's a primal thing, honestly. Like, so even for those who are suffering with that, don't be too hard on yourself, because it is literally hardwired into your genes. You think about the concept, like sister just shared, in terms of like pulling away from people, or you know just situations that are different from where you're at. What that really means is I'm going to be seen. And for some people, it's an absolute nightmare, the thought of being seen. There's people I know who are pathological liars. They just lie all the time, and they enshroud themselves with all these lies and all the smoke and mirrors, because they don't want to be seen. And we're kind of programmed on a biological level to be like that, because you think about moving with the herd. There's safety. You could watch any like Animal Planet or whatever, right? Once one gazelle or wildebeest breaks away from the herd, all of the cheetahs and the lions attack. So we have that kind of, even as those who are living a human experience, we have this hardwired into us, like, as soon as I step away from the group, I'm going to die. So it's a very primal thing. And the nomadic ones that kind of tend to move out from the group, the chances of them dying have now increased. you know so we equate moving out and grabbing or owning our own identity to death. That's the equation in the brain. It becomes death in that particular sense. And yeah, just to build on that. So stepping out from the herd is important, but it's also important to have a herd that understands that sometimes you step out. Like, oh, there she is. She's okay. We're over here doing anything. We see her over there walking into the way. Yeah, she's about to do her. She does that once in a while. We know. We may even know when to expect her back. So from a distance, we kind of understand that she does her thing. Or maybe the herd will even accept that she's not one of us anymore. She's gone so far into what she's doing. She's become something else and has decided that being true to herself is her sacred act. Like, in some cultures you have vision quest, or you even have walkabouts, where a person going through an initiation process will go off by themselves with very little resources, and they'll keep moving and moving and moving until they have a vision that speaks to their purpose. And that within itself is an initiation, right? So the process of being true to yourself, and even if it is like pulling away from the herd, like Sister Kashia just said, or pulling away from certain ideations, that is actually a spiritual initiation. Though we may look at it as a cultural one, but what's happening in that moment is that we're accepting an initiation into self transformation, an initiation into awakening, an initiation into growth that's led by our soul seeking to fulfill its destiny on earth. That's an initiation. You know, it's a very sacred thing beyond the intellectual and beyond the cultural. You know, again, anybody who wants to share, just feel free to raise your hand and unmute, do whatever you feel like doing.